Okay, so just to finish the Purim story thing, so I have Bill Clinton as Achashverosh for obvious reasons, because of his affinity for, shall we say, beauty pageants. And I had Hillary as Vashti, who was decapitated politically by this election, just like the original Vashti, the daughter or granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar. So she held that she was the real Malchus of the world, and not her low-life husband that started as a stable boy, Achashverosh, and rose to power by accident, because Darius, Daryavesh I and Koresh did not have long lasting, one 6 months and one 2 years, and then they were gone. So he, by default, was a general who took over afterward. In any event, so we have the Purim story. We have that that we needed for America to survive. Tremendous collapse and upheaval. And now we need a bloodless thing in Eretz Yisrael that's akin to the Hanukkah Maisa, where the Torah, Judaism, comes to power and cleanses the Beis Hamikdash, takes the area back, and prepares for Mashiach so that we can have the Beis Hamikdash again. So that would be the next miracle we're waiting for, and it happened in that order. Purim Maisa was first, then they rebuilt the Second Temple, and somewhere in the Second Temple history, when the Greeks came to power over the Persians, that's when we had the problems with the Greeks, and we needed the Hanukkah miracle to salvage Eretz Yisrael for the next couple hundred years before. Unfortunately, the Romans, we went out into the Gauls for 2,000 years now. But in any event, I was going to say something else.
About Hillary.
Yeah, no, when you were talking about her not looking very well. I was going to say another thing. All right, I'll get back to it. So I just want to, before I talk more about, well, let me finish so taking back the Temple Mount, Rameir says that the fact that the Arabs are up there overrunning the place is the biggest single Chilul Hashem in the history of the world. From the time of the Adam HaRishon till now, the fact that it's in our hands and we could remove them for 49 years from up there, and we could cleanse the area, and we could prepare, even if we're not allowed to build the Beis Hamikdash, at least we could get it ready to be built. We could take down the mosque, start the physical korbanos up, or the sacrifices up, and do everything in our power to show Hashem we're dedicated toward wanting to serve Him with the Beis Hamikdash, and that would lead Him to shorten the exile and bring Mashiach so that we could build the Beis Hamikdash. But it's up to us to show the courage, the Mesiras Nefesh, self-sacrifice to want the Beis Hamikdash to be rebuilt, and that takes our doing things, calling for things, being a movement, protesting, whatever it takes to put the idea, the concept of this is what we're supposed to be doing for Hashem into the consciousness, whereas all the Jews, that's what I was saying, we're all over the map. Everybody else has a different idea what's important, what's the priority. The priority is the Beis Hamikdash. That's the whole goal of what we're looking for, to go back to the place where we're able to serve God on the highest level possible and have the highest level of holiness for our people. And it's only possible in Eretz Yisrael with the Beis Hamikdash, with the Shekhinah dwelling, the divine presence dwelling with us again. So I was saying, this is possibly the closest we've come to having this concept possible, with Trump in the White House, who's a friend of Israel, and possibly would go along with it if we could get the movement going to get there. We could take that step forward. This is the closest we've been since the time of Rabbi Akiva and Bar Kokhba. Anybody who knows the story, they initially, for a year and a half, they drove the Romans out of Eretz Yisrael, and Rabbi Akiva was telling him to rebuild the Beis Hamikdash, so it was only supposed to be 3. It would last forever, and whatever the Romans planned to do next would fail, because the 3rd Beis Hamikdash was built, so they couldn't reconquer. But Bar Kokhba didn't understand that, and he rebelled and became arrogant, and that led to a downfall. But we're on the verge of the Geula with Rabbi Akiva and Bar Kokhba driving the Romans out of Eretz Yisrael for that interval of time, and then they could have built the Beis Mikdash, and they failed. It was a failed Mashiach. It wasn't a false Mashiach, it was a failed Mashiach. And as such, we are on the verge maybe of another era in the next few years where we could have a sympathetic ear, a voice in the White House where some of these things can be entertained. Whereas when you had Obama, it was impossible. When you had George W. Bush, it was impossible. None of this was possible, and now maybe it's possible. Like I said, Achashverosh, once he turned and became a friend of the Jews, because he had to, he still didn't let them go build the Beis Mikdash. He knew that was the end of his malchus. It would be cut in half, because he knew that when Hashem is ruling on the world, he's not ruling over that area. And so it's the biggest Chil Hashem. So obviously everyone says, well, the Holocaust is a Chil Hashem too. I mean, the Jews who died were killed, al Kiddush Hashem, that's a Kiddush Hashem. They were killed because they're Jews, and many of them gave up their lives willingly because they wanted to sanctify Hashem's name. So that's not what we're talking about. The Chil Hashem is that these goyim thought they could do anything to the Jewish people they wanted. They thought that nobody's home upstairs, and that's a Chil Hashem. That's a desecration of God's name. That's sullying His honor, that He's impotent or doesn't exist. God forbid. So the same thing with Har HaBayis now. Every second of every day is filled with this Chil Hashem that's on a greater scale, even than the Holocaust. As important as Jewish lives are, that was in Gullus, where we got it for 2,000 years. We got, maybe not as bad as 6 million, but we were killed every day. But this is in Eretz Yisrael itself, after we came home, after the Gula process started, because of the failure of our people, the leadership especially, to understand who they are and what they are. That's another thing Rameir always said. We have a collective historical amnesia of who we are and what we are, who we're supposed to be in the world. And the phobias of being beaten in the exile, the fear of the goyim that's engendered in us for 2,000 years, have made us a guilt-ridden people in what he said, in need of a national collective couch, psychiatric couch. That's what he used to say. And it sounds funny, and you get a little smirk and you laugh, but it's really sad. It's really true. We have so many phobias and so many fears. Rock the boat, and America's going to sanction us or go remove aid, and we have no trust in God. It's as if God doesn't exist, and we don't have to show any kind of trust in God or faith in God, and we just expect all our friends like America to help us. We put our faith in America instead of in God. That's a Chil Hashem too. So we talk about taking back the Temple Mount, there's a lot of obstacles. The obstacles aren't just in the government. The obstacle is in us. If we could learn, it's a process. I can't say it anymore. If I didn't read Meir's writings and Rabbi Binyamin's writings, I wouldn't know what they're talking about. I wouldn't know that this is what Judaism is. Judaism is freeing your mind from all fear of all humanity. It's fear of God. And when you have Yirah Shamayim, trust in God and fear of God, and recognize He's ruling the world, even though you can't see Him, even though you don't hear Him, when you understand that He's ruling the world, you lose your fear of everybody else. All the other phobias, all the other fears go out the window. It is up to us to work on ourselves to the point where we understand this concept and can live in it. Because without living in it, you can know all of the Torah. But if you don't know this concept, then it's called Mikatnei Emunah. You have a weakened or lessened, those of little faith, to quote the wrong book. Ye of little faith. But it's serious. The Gemara in Sota in 37a says that there are many tzaddikim who unfortunately lose portions of their olam haba because they exhibit this fear of the goyim, or they don't really have trust in God to the complete level that God requires of all of us, not just tzaddikim, and obviously He expects more of them. But yeah,
That's not to say that we shouldn't be taking up arms. I mean, King David had an army, Moshe,
Right.
Rabbeinu had an army.
Absolutely.
It's just having faith that you will overcome the enemy.
It takes
ultimately.
courage to get an army
Right.
together and say you're going to fight for your rights. He says like this. This is what he says. He says, where is it? Here. He says, there's no doubt about it. With God's help, the Arabs of Israel will go to live in their own lands, and while this will not bring peace, because they'll still hate us and still fight from there will still be an existence, and Jews will be able to walk the streets and not be murdered every week in fear, walking on the buses, in the marketplaces, in the streets and highways of the Jewish state. And Arab babies will not threaten our demography to vote us out of existence one day, because they won't be there to be citizens, to vote, and to make it Palestine instead of Israel. So he says, Jew, get up from the national couch. Throw away the sick, corrosive guilt. Be strong and proud and comfortable with Jewishness and Jewish survival. And I add, and have faith and trust in God. Be comfortable with these concepts. The praises of Hashem in their throat and a two-edged sword in their hand. It's a pasuk in Tehillim, I think, but it might be in Mishlei. So Rameir used to end a lot of his speeches by saying, faith in God and a powerful Jewish army. Is that not the Jewish way? Of course it is. And so no guilt, no apologies, only pride and strength in Jewish belief and survival. He used to say, those who only believe in the strength of Israel, the army of Israel, but have no faith in God, they're crippled in one leg. And those who are completely into the Torah and completely into the trust in God, but they don't think they have to have an army, are crippled in the other leg. So you have to have faith in God, but we have to do what we have to do. We have to have a strong Jewish army, and in this world, certainly because of our sins and because of the lack of high lofty level. But even if we did have a high lofty level, like you said, David and Melech had an army. They had to fight wars. If everything's from Hashem, in that regard, you just have to sit back and wait. No, Hashem wants us to act. He wanted us to act at Yam Suf, to throw ourselves into the river, into the sea, before he would do the miracle and save us. And because of who we are or whatever, he expects us to have an army and fight our enemies. But because we have enough courage to do that, we will win, because Hashem will help us. Especially if the war is something that's beyond us. The 6-Day War, they thought they were going to be wiped out. They were going to do their best, but they didn't have the army, they didn't have the manpower, they didn't have the arms. It was a complete miracle. So obviously they had no choice and they fought. So Hashem used that. Even though they weren't religious people, most of them, 9/10 of them. They were fighting for Eretz Yisrael and fighting for Jewish lives. And had the courage, because they were up against the wall. And so Hashem used that to give them this great miracle. But we have to show something. You can't just sit back and expect Hashem to do everything. We have to do it for ourselves. We have to try, and that's why you want the Temple Mount back, you've got to go take it. The only way to go take it is you have to go up against the Israeli government who's blocking it. The Arabs aren't blocking it. The Arabs would leave tomorrow. He used to say, the moment they would turn on the radio and I'm in power, Kahane as the prime minister, half of them would be over the border already. That's what he used to say, and it's true. If they knew a Torah government was coming, the settlers have a reputation of being the devil incarnate to the Arabs. They're afraid of them more than the IDF that's shackled by the government and not allowed to do anything to the Arabs. So of course they're not afraid of the Arabs. Kahane used to say they throw Molotov cocktails and stones, and the soldiers back away. You know what that does for a teenage Arab mutt in the ground? That he sees the idea of backing away from him. So of course they lose their fear and they think they're winning. They would be wiped out in 2 seconds. They have nothing. Now they have some guns because we were insane enough to give them guns in the Oslo death accords. But the bottom line is, if we want the Temple Mount back in our hands, we've got to go take it. Hashem will help us if we show that it's important to us, that we realize this is Judaism, this is what the fulfillment of Torah necessitates. This, if we yearn for this holiness, this Kedusha, then we can have Hashem on our side doing it. If we're going to just sit, well, I'm waiting back, I'm sitting back, I'm waiting for Mashiach. Well, he's waiting for us. God is waiting for us and Mashiach is waiting for us. We got it backwards. That we think that we're just supposed to sit back and wait for Mashiach, wait for Hashem. Why? Because Hashem wants to see that we have faith in Him. That we really believe He's stronger than all the nations combined. Unless we demonstrate it, we don't prove anything of our mettle of who we are, so Hashem's not going to do it. Or if He does do it, He does it late in history, very painful, with very few Jews left in history, Reb Mary used to say. That's what's going to be. If we go full term with this slow process of Geula, that is just agony. If we want there to be a semblance of a glory, of a miraculous and great triumph type of Geula, it's going to take our action, our blood, sweat, and tears, our Mesiras Nefesh. And that's what he taught. And he said, you can't sit here and talk about it, you got to do things about it. I don't have all the answers, I don't know what we could do. It's a formidable challenge. Those living in Eretz Yisrael, I wrote to a rabbi in Eretz Yisrael, and I was asking him some questions, very hard questions, about whether I could make Aliyah, because I feel like I'll be persecuted, just like we saw happening to Ettinger, Mayor Ettinger, the grandson of Reb Meir, being arrested and put in what's called administrative detention for 6 months or whatever it was. So I feel it'll be the same thing. I can't do anything if that's going to happen. So he basically wrote back, I love my state, I don't see anything negative about it, and I don't want to talk about it. That's how afraid he is to answer, even in an email.
Amazing.
That's how afraid they are. That's how much they're overwhelmed by the fascist government that exists there.
There's something more, because I've been really shunned by the rabbis and by my community. I'm like,
Well,
no
because the
longer
Meir
in my
Kahane
community.
is frightening to them.
I'm not allowed, they don't want me to post on Facebook.
Really?
They don't want me to have a gun. They don't want me to be strong and protect
Because
myself as a Jew.
you're making waves,
And-
you're causing them trouble, potentially.
No, I'm making them question that their God is this elusive, ridiculous thing called peace. It's not about peace.
Yeah.
We need to protect
That's right,
ourselves,
that's
and that's what the Holocaust was about. Jews were not,
Right.
didn't feel like we could protect ourselves. That's not number one.
That's
I was alone, a girl, the most phobic, afraid person on the face of this planet.
Now you
And
built
once I
yourself up.
started,
Right.
once I started listening to Rav Kahane, and I became strong, and I learned how to protect myself, and I'm fearless because I've got Hashem. And no shul, no community can banish me, because it's not about people, and it's not about peace, and it's not about not rocking the boat. It's about standing up for the only thing that we have, and that's Yiddishkeit, and that's Judaism, and that's Israel, and
each other.
that's Mashiach coming, and the Beit HaMikdash, stuff that they don't even want me to talk about.
Right.
And I feel lost because my neshama is connected to it, and that's why I'm here. That's why I drove
Wow.
80 miles to come here.
Wow. So let me just say another
Sure,
thing
cool.
that Mayor used to say. He used to say all the time in speeches all over the place, in Israel and all over the country, when he came here to speak. He said, those who say they're too weary, they're tired of war, and so their only option is to make a peace that they hope will work, but they don't have any confidence in it. Then he says, let those people go and be the people in Auschwitz, looking up at the sky when every airplane was theirs and none were ours. And what would they have done? What would they have given to have a land called Israel? What would they have done to have an army to come and rescue them? What would they have felt? He says, we came here for a Jewish state. And peace or no peace, we hope for peace, but with no peace, we want a Jewish state. And we're not willing to give it up and go back to being a minority where everybody tramples on us all over the place for 2,000 years. If we have a government that is too weary and is too weak and doesn't know what to do, let them get out of the way, and those who know what needs to be done, let them take over. Because we came here for a Jewish state. And we want peace, as he says, peace. You guys want peace out here in America. You don't know what peace is. My children serve in the army. They could die at any time. Of course I want peace. What person doesn't want peace? You don't know. You're not risking anything by here calling for peace over here in Los Angeles or New York. And he would say, that's what he would say. He says, of course we want peace, but we want a Jewish state after 2,000 years. Amen. And if we're going to have one, peace or no peace, but a Jewish state. And we'll fight forever if we have to keep our Jewish state, because we don't want to go back out into the exile, where all of the minority rights that we had of Holocausts and Inquisitions and pogroms, big and small, he used to say, and he says those things are, thank you world, but no thank you, we'll have our own state now. We don't want that kind of an existence anymore. And so we're willing to fight for it. And if you lose your nerve and you lose your koach and you lose your courage, get out of the way.
That's it.
And that's what they're not willing to do. So I just want to close with something his son wrote. It's on this week's Parsha. He wrote this Dvar Torah for Parshas Vayer, which is the Shabbos Parsha of the week of his Yartzeit. And this was on the third or fourth Yartzeit. He was on a radio show actually, and he gave this Dvar Torah on the Parsha about his father. And Parshas Vayera, here we are. It says, who sees and who is the donkey? Broadcast in 1999 on Arutz Sheva for the 9th Yartzeit of Rabbi Meir Kahane. 99, right? The next year, Binyamin was killed in 2000. Okay, so the Midrash, Pirkei Divrei Rabbi Eliezer, deals in length with the Akedas Yitzhak, the main event in this week's Parsha. It's interesting that this week's Parsha, that is his Yartzeit Parsha, is about the Akedah, which is like self-sacrifice for Judaism, for God, which he was a martyr, he died, he's a Kodesh. And also it talks about Avraham throwing Yishmael out of the house, out of the land. Right? Two of the main things that are about Reb Meir Kahane, Mesiras Nefesh, and his movement to free us of this plague of Yishmael. And so his brother, Rev Nachman Kahane, wrote a Dvar Torah last week talking about his brother, and he wrote and he said that you see there's two different opinions. Avram Avinu's opinion and Sarah Amenu's opinion. Avram said, no, I want to keep him here. He sort of, because of his love for his son Yishmael, he didn't see the evil that he was becoming. And Sarah saw clearly and said, nothing doing. He's going to be a threat to our son. Yitzhak, he's got to go. And Hashem agreed with Sarah. He says the Israeli government is monitoring what Avram Avinu was about. Wrongly, would have been a tragic mistake. But we're making that tragic mistake to keep the Arabs here. And Rabbi Kahane was on Sarah Amenu's side, because Sarah saw clearly and had a greater prophecy, the Chazal say, than Avram at this moment, or in general, on a higher level of prophecy, to see what Yishmael was going to become. And everybody says, oh, Yishmael, you know, I've heard your voice, Hagar, and part of it is true, that Hagar was being chased out because she was mistreating Sarah, so she was given the evil eye, and she miscarried the first baby, so she was upset and ran away. And so I've heard your complaint, and Yishmael, I've heard the child where he's crying when he was almost dying out in the wilderness. Everyone says how cruel Avram, he gave a sick child, he kicked him out the door with one loaf of bread and one one cruse of water, and sent him out into the desert in the scorching heat. So what's wrong with